Most people believe becoming a millionaire is about income. They believe the number on the paycheck determines the number in the bank. That belief is the first trap, because wealth has never been about how much money you make. It's about how you think, how you decide, and how you behave when uncertainty shows up. A low income does not disqualify you from becoming a millionaire, but a low level of discipline does. A low income does not stop opportunity, but an undisciplined mind will sabotage every opportunity it touches. The market, business, and life itself do not reward effort. They reward consistency of behavior. And consistency does not come from motivation. It comes from clarity, emotional control, and rule-based thinking. If you want to become a millionaire on a low income, you must stop thinking in terms of money and start thinking in terms of probability, risk, and execution. This is not a story about luck. This is a story about alignment between beliefs and actions. Most people believe wealth begins with money. They believe the size of the account determines the size of the opportunity. This belief feels logical, comforting, and completely wrong. Wealth does not begin with money. Wealth begins with the moment you accept risk at a deep emotional level. Not tolerate it, not intellectually understand it. Accept it. Until risk is accepted, money becomes a source of fear. And when money is connected to fear, every decision you make will be distorted. You will hesitate when you should act. You will act when you should wait. You will cut winners short and let losses grow. This is not because you lack intelligence or effort, but because fear is running the decision-making process. Risk acceptance is not about being brave. It is about removing emotional resistance to uncertainty. The market, business, and life itself operate in uncertainty. There are no guarantees. There are only probabilities. When you resist this reality, you create internal conflict, and internal conflict always leaks into behavior. Most people say they accept risk, but their actions reveal otherwise. They check outcomes obsessively. They adjust decisions mid-process. They abandon plans after discomfort. These behaviors are not mistakes, they are symptoms. Symptoms of unaccepted risk. When risk is truly accepted, something profound happens. The need to be right disappears. The need to control outcomes dissolves. You stop trying to predict and start focusing on execution. This is the psychological shift where wealth actually begins. Money magnifies behavior. It does not fix it. If you have fear-based habits with small amounts, larger amounts will only amplify the damage. This is why many people who suddenly acquire money lose it just as fast. They never change the relationship with risk. They only change the numbers. Low income is not a disadvantage in this process. In many ways, it is an advantage. It forces you to confront risk honestly. It forces you to define limits. It forces discipline. When resources are limited, every decision matters. This creates awareness. Awareness creates structure. Structure creates consistency. Wealthy individuals understand that loss is not failure. Loss is information. Loss is feedback. Loss is the price of admission. When you emotionally associate loss with personal failure, you will do everything possible to avoid it. And in avoiding loss, you avoid opportunity. Risk acceptance means you define the downside before you enter any decision. You decide in advance what you are willing to lose, and then you make peace with that outcome. Completely. Not partially. Not with hope attached. Peace. Once that peace exists, fear no longer has leverage. And without fear, discipline becomes effortless. You no longer need willpower. You no longer need motivation. Your behavior stabilizes because there is no internal argument. Most people are not inconsistent because they are lazy. They are inconsistent because they are afraid. Afraid of losing, afraid of being wrong, afraid of repeating past pain. When risk is accepted, these fears lose their power. The illusion is that money creates safety. In reality, clarity creates safety. When you know exactly what you are risking and why, uncertainty becomes manageable. You stop reacting emotionally to every fluctuation. You stop searching for certainty where none exists. Risk acceptance also removes urgency. Urgency is emotional pressure disguised as ambition. It pushes people to overtrade, overinvest, overcommit. It forces decisions before alignment exists. When you accept risk, you understand that missing an opportunity is irrelevant. There will always be another. The goal is not to participate in everything. The goal is to participate correctly. Wealth is built through repetition of correct behavior, not through occasional brilliance. Correct behavior requires emotional neutrality. Emotional neutrality requires risk acceptance. You cannot control outcomes. You can only control your response to them. When you try to control outcomes, you experience stress. When you control your process, you experience confidence. Confidence is not certainty. Confidence is knowing you will act appropriately regardless of outcome. This is where most people fail. They confuse confidence with being right. Professionals know confidence comes from preparation and acceptance, not prediction. They do not need to know what will happen next. They only need to know what they will do if certain conditions occur. When risk is accepted, patience emerges naturally. You stop forcing situations. You wait for alignment. You allow probability to work. Time becomes an ally instead of an enemy. Low income often creates impatience because the desire to escape current circumstances feels urgent. But urgency collapses discipline. The paradox is that the faster you try to get rich, the slower you actually progress. Risk acceptance slows you down in the right way. It aligns behavior with reality. Wealth is not created by avoiding losses. It is created by managing them. Every successful system includes loss. Every profitable endeavor includes drawdowns. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail is not intelligence, but emotional preparedness. If you cannot emotionally accept losing a predefined amount, you are not ready to pursue wealth. Because wealth demands exposure. Exposure demands vulnerability. Vulnerability demands acceptance. This acceptance does not make you reckless. It makes you precise. You become selective. You respect boundaries. You stop gambling and start executing. Once risk is accepted, money becomes neutral. It is no longer tied to identity or self-worth. It becomes a tool, and tools are meant to be used according to rules, not emotions. This is the foundation. Without it, everything else collapses. Strategies fail, plans break, motivation fades. With it, growth becomes inevitable. Wealth does not begin when you make more money. It begins when you stop fearing the possibility of losing it. Most people believe consistency is a result of success. They think once they start winning, consistency will naturally follow. This belief reverses reality. Consistency does not come from results. Results come from consistency, and consistency has nothing to do with talent, intelligence, or motivation. It is the natural byproduct of emotional stability. Emotions are not the enemy. Unmanaged emotions are. When emotions dictate behavior, performance becomes unstable. When behavior becomes unstable, results become random. Random results destroy confidence. And without confidence, people abandon processes that could have worked if given time. Consistency compounds because it creates predictability. Predictable behavior allows probabilities to express themselves. Without consistency, probability has no chance to work. You may have a solid system, a valuable skill, or a strong opportunity, but if your behavior changes based on recent outcomes, you reset the edge to zero every time. Most people sabotage themselves after wins and after losses. After a win, confidence turns into overconfidence. Rules loosen, size increases, discipline fades. After a loss, confidence turns into fear. Hesitation appears. Opportunities are skipped. Both reactions come from emotion, not logic. Emotional reactions feel justified in the moment. That is what makes them dangerous. They feel like insight, intuition, or urgency. In reality, they are impulses rooted in past pain or pleasure. When decisions are driven by emotional memory instead of present moment information, consistency collapses. Consistency is not doing the same thing blindly. It is executing the same process regardless of emotional state. It means the rules do not change because your feelings changed. It means your identity is not attached to outcomes. It means you show up the same way after a loss as you do after a win. This is difficult because the human mind is wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure. Loss creates pain, gain creates pleasure. Without structure, the mind will always try to protect itself emotionally, even if that protection damages long-term performance. Consistency requires a shift in how success is defined. If success is defined by money, emotions will always interfere. Money fluctuates. Outcomes vary. If success is defined by execution, consistency becomes achievable. You either followed your rules or you didn't. There is no emotional debate. Compounding only works when actions are repeated without interruption. Miss one step and the chain weakens. Miss several and it breaks. Emotional decision-making interrupts compounding because it introduces randomness into behavior. Most people overestimate the impact of individual action. S. And underestimate the power of repeated behavior. They want big wins to validate their effort. They want fast results to prove they are on the right path. This desire creates pressure. Pressure distorts perception. Distorted perception leads to forced decisions. Wealth is not built through intensity, it is built through endurance. Endurance requires emotional control. Emotional control does not mean suppressing feelings, it means refusing to let feelings dictate actions. Low income often increases emotional intensity because each decision feels heavier. The stakes feel personal. This is why discipline is most important when resources are limited. Every emotional mistake has a higher relative cost. But this also means consistency has a greater relative impact. Small, consistent actions compound faster than large, inconsistent ones. This principle applies to capital, skill development, and decision-making. The size of the action matters far less than the regularity of execution. Emotions create the illusion of urgency. Urgency pushes people to abandon process in favor of relief. Relief feels good temporarily, but it damages trust in oneself. When you break rules to feel better, you teach your mind that emotions are in control. Trust is built when you do what you said you would do, especially when it is uncomfortable. Consistency builds self-trust. Self-trust reduces emotional interference. Reduced emotional interference strengthens consistency. This is the compounding loop most people never enter. Inconsistent behavior produces inconsistent identity. One day you feel disciplined, the next day reckless. One day confident, the next day fearful. This instability drains energy and focus. Consistency simplifies identity. You become someone who executes rules, nothing more, nothing less. Professionals do not rely on motivation. Motivation fluctuates. They rely on structure. Structure holds behavior steady when emotions rise and fall. This is why routines matter, rules matter, limits matter. Emotion-driven decisions feel personal. Rule-driven decisions feel impersonal. Impersonal decisions protect you from yourself. They create distance between stimulus and response. In that distance, clarity lies. The market, business, and life reward those who can repeat correct behavior under varying conditions. Conditions will never be perfect. Emotions will never disappear. Waiting for the right feeling is a losing strategy. Acting according to structure regardless of feeling is a winning one. Consistency also requires patience. Compounding is invisible in the early stages. Results appear small. Progress feels slow. This is where emotions whisper that something is wrong. That urge to change, adjust, or quit is emotional noise. Consistency means staying the course when nothing seems to be happening. Most people quit not because the process fails, but because boredom and discomfort become unbearable. They mistake lack of excitement for lack of progress. In reality, stability is a sign that the process is working. Emotions crave stimulation. Consistency thrives on calm. The calmer your internal state, the clearer your perception. Clear perception leads to better decisions. Better decisions repeated over time create extraordinary outcomes. Wealth is the visible result of invisible consistency. You never see the thousands of small, disciplined actio. NS. You only see the outcome, but the outcome is simply compounded behavior. If you want to know why most people never reach their potential, look at how often they allow emotions to override structure. One emotional decision may seem insignificant. Repeated emotional decisions destroy compounding. Consistency is not glamorous. It does not create stories. It creates results. And results, given enough time, always compound. Emotions will always be present. The question is not whether you feel them. The question is whether you obey them. When you stop obeying emotions and start executing structure, consistency becomes inevitable. And when consistency becomes inevitable, wealth becomes a mathematical outcome, not a miracle. Most people are raised to believe that success comes from being right. They are taught to search for certainty, to avoid mistakes, and to wait until they feel confident before acting. This mindset works in environments where outcomes are predictable and rules are fixed. But wealth is not created in predictable environments. Wealth is created in uncertainty. And uncertainty does not reward certainty thinking. It rewards probability thinking. Certainty is comforting. It gives the illusion of control. It makes people feel safe. But certainty is rarely real. It is a mental construction designed to protect the ego from discomfort. When people demand certainty before acting, they delay opportunity. When they act only when they feel sure, they usually act late. And when reality contradicts their certainty, they experience emotional shock. Probability thinking accepts uncertainty as a permanent condition. It does not fight it. It does not try to eliminate it. It works within it. This shift changes everything. You stop asking, will this work? And start asking, does this situation offer a favorable edge over time? An edge does not guarantee a result. It guarantees a statistical advantage across many occurrences. Most people understand this concept intellectually, but fail to live it emotionally. They still react to individual outcomes as if each one defines them. Probability thinking requires emotional detachment from single events. One outcome means nothing. A series of outcomes means everything. When you think in certainty, every decision feels personal. A loss feels like a mistake. A win feels like validation. This emotional attachment creates volatility in behavior. You change size, you change rules, you change timing. Each adjustment is an attempt to regain certainty, and each adjustment breaks consistency. Probability thinking removes the need to be right. You no longer identify with outcomes. You identify with process. If you executed your plan, the outcome is irrelevant. This mindset creates emotional stability, which is the foundation of discipline. Most people overreact to short-term results because they have no probabilistic framework. Without a framework, the mind fills the gap with fear and hope. Fear pushes you out of good opportunities too early. Hope keeps you in bad ones too long. Both are reactions to uncertainty. Probability thinking introduces boundaries. You know in advance what defines success and failure. You know the expected range of outcomes. This knowledge does not eliminate losses, but it eliminates surprise. And surprise is what triggers emotional reactions. When outcomes stop surprising you, emotions lose their grip. Low-income environments often intensify certainty thinking. When resources are limited, people want guarantees. They feel they cannot afford mistakes. Ironically, this mindset increases the likelihood of mistakes because it encourages hesitation and overthinking. Probability thinking reframes mistakes. A loss within a well-defined process is not a mistake. It is a normal outcome. A mistake is violating the process. This distinction changes behavior instantly. You stop trying to avoid losses and start trying to avoid errors. You do not need to win often to succeed. You need to win when the odds are favorable and limit damage when they are not. This is a mathematical reality, not a motivational concept. But math only works if behavior allows it to work. Certainty thinking searches for the perfect setup, the flawless plan, the guaranteed opportunity. Probability thinking understands that perfection does not exist. There will always be variables outside your control. Waiting for perfection is a form of avoidance disguised as discipline. Professionals act when conditions align with their edge, not when they feel emotionally ready. Emotional readiness is unreliable. Conditions are objective. Probability thinking is grounded in objectivity. Another trap of certainty thinking is overconfidence after success. A few wins create the illusion that certainty has been achieved. This leads to increased risk, reduced discipline, and eventual drawdown. Probability thinkers expect variance. They expect streaks. They do not change behavior because outcomes cluster. Variance is not a problem. Misinterpreting variance is. Probability thinking also. Hang is how you experience time. You stop rushing. You stop forcing outcomes. You allow sequences to unfold. This patience is not passive. It is disciplined waiting. Wealth is built by allowing favorable probabilities to play out repeatedly. Interrupting this process due to emotional reactions destroys the edge. Each time you interfere, you reset the statistics. Most people sabotage themselves not by bad decisions, but by inconsistent follow-through. They abandon processes before probability has time to assert itself. They confuse temporary discomfort with long-term failure. Thinking in probabilities requires humility. You accept that you do not know what will happen next. This humility is strength. It keeps you flexible. It keeps you grounded. It prevents ego-driven decisions. Certainty thinking feeds the ego. Probability thinking serves the process. When you no longer need to be right, you become free to execute. When you are free to execute, discipline becomes natural. When discipline is natural, results stabilize. And when results stabilize, growth becomes inevitable. The desire for certainty never disappears completely. It must be managed. Structure manages it. Rules manage it. Predefined risk manages it. These tools create a framework where probability can operate without interference. Wealth is not created by predicting the future. It is created by positioning yourself correctly within uncertainty. This requires trusting mathematics over emotions, process over impulse, and long-term probability over short-term comfort. When you think in probabilities, losses no longer scare you. Wins no longer excite you excessively. Both become data points. Data does not evoke emotion. It informs decisions. This is the mental shift that separates amateurs from professionals. Amateurs seek certainty. Professionals accept uncertainty and operate within it. And once you truly accept that you do not need certainty to succeed, you stop fighting reality. You start working with it. That is when wealth stops being a matter of luck and becomes a matter of alignment between your behavior and how the world actually works. Wealth is not built by income certainty or emotion. It is built by alignment. When you accept risk without fear, execute with consistency, and think in probabilities instead of guarantees, your behavior stops working against you. Money becomes a tool, not a trigger. Results become a consequence, not a chase. This is not about getting rich quickly. It is about becoming stable enough to let time and discipline do their work. When your mindset matches reality, wealth is no longer a dream, it becomes inevitable.